Good evening, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our 4-part series, Nonprofit Essentials. Tonight, we're going to be talking about bookkeeping. I wanted to make sure that everyone knows about the last 2 Wednesdays coming up, the next 2 consecutive Wednesdays. Next Wednesday online with attorney Aaron Rogers. We'll talk about more legal aspects of running a nonprofit. And then our final presentation will be live in Houston. And we've got 4 guest speakers, leaders in the Houston arts community. We have Florette Fernando. She's associate professor and director of the arts program at University of Houston. Deborah McNulty is a senior vice president for Mid-America Arts Alliance. Angela Carranza, the executive director of Fresh Arts, and Jenny Ash, the executive director of Art League Houston. We are going to pick their brains mostly about board development and fundraising. So if that's of interest to you, I think that's where our questions are going to lean. We're working on the questions now, but we are leaning heavily toward board development and fundraising because that's what we have a lot of questions about. So please join us in Houston if you're there. That's on May 13th, or join us next Wednesday night with Aaron Rogers. So I'm going to turn it over quickly tonight so we can get started. We have a lot of content to Lisa Sretenovic, our Talla's resident CPA, and she's going to walk us through how good record-keeping practices can not only make your 990 easier, but can tell a story and then can help you plan for the future of your nonprofit. So Lisa, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I am Lisa Sretenovic, the Velocity Detective, and I volunteer with Talla as a CPA. So yeah, I know about tax and bookkeeping, but really you didn't volunteer to be on the board of a nonprofit organization so that you could do bookkeeping, right? But what I want you to understand is that by keeping certain records, you actually get to tell the story of how you are fulfilling the mission of that nonprofit. So it's more about not keeping records because you have to do some regulatory reporting to the IRS, or that you have some grant report that you have to do. No. This is telling the story about how this nonprofit organization is really fulfilling the story. And by default, then, you're going to have a very painless 990 and relatively painless grant reporting. So we're going to jump right into record keeping. Again, the 990 is the tax return that all nonprofit organizations need to file. And it doesn't really matter how small or big you are, you've got to file one or the other. Well, Lisa, I'm under 50,000 and all I have to file is the postcard. Therefore, I don't have to do much in the way of record keeping. And I'm here to say that if you think that way, you're actually leaving on the table so much power and impact that your nonprofit can have, because you're not letting the world know that you have this nonprofit and the great things that you're doing. So the goal is not to file the tax return. Yes, you have to as part of your obligations, but that's really just the final chapter. It's really just a snapshot of the way that the IRS wants to see your story. And now it can be very powerful in itself, but that's not the main goal. The main goal is to let the world know what kind of impact your nonprofit organization is having. And most of what we're going to be talking about tonight is how to build that story utilizing the tool QuickBooks Online. And the payoff is going to be that it's not just the 990 that you're going to be able to produce, but it's the story all along the way and how you communicate that with the rest of the world. Yes, if you're filing just the 990 and the postcard, all that says to the rest of the world is we've had less than $50,000 in in revenue that we've generated. And that's all it tells the world. But the 990EZ and the 990, first of all, they are available to anybody that wants them by just going to the IRS and Googling it, right? Searching for it. And when they do that, their page 2 of the 990EZ and the 990 is really like absolute gold in telling the world what it is that your nonprofit does, in what its mission is, as well as the top 3 programs that it has. So when you look at page 2 of the 990EZ or the 990, it says, this is our mission, and this is how we are fulfilling our mission. This is the impact we're having in society. And so utilizing the 990EZ and the 990 in order to tell the story of what it is that your nonprofit does goes beyond just fulfilling the need to file with the IRS because that's a requirement. This is you should have this front and center. This is what you want to present to potential grantors. This is how you want to think about motivating your board, trying to get other people to volunteer, because look at all these absolutely wonderful things that we are doing. And these are the mechanisms with which you can shout it out to the world. But they are in a particular format. And given that they have this structure, we want to make sure that our record keeping throughout the year makes it really easy for us to fill this in. And then if someone wants to look at our supporting financial documents to this report that we had to file with the IRS, they tie out really easy and very cleanly. So that's where we want to start. We want to say, okay, well, if we've got this really good marketing material through the 990EZ and the 990 on page 2, how can we get our record keeping to A, easily allow us to fill things in here, and B, support the information that's already going to be easily accessible to anyone that wants to see it. One of the things that happened less than a week ago at the US Department of Treasury is that they announced an additional transparency initiative. So there are 3 things that as a nonprofit you want to keep in mind at all points. This is your impact. That's your mission. How are you fulfilling that mission? What impact are you having? The second is that you want to be transparent. Again, with this press release, it's really, really key that the government, the IRS and the federal government, as well as the state government, are insisting upon transparency. And that doesn't mean that you just filed your report. That means that they want to make sure that you are transparent from the 990 all the way down through your policies and procedures. It's everything that's in the organization, not just the report that you file once a year. It's the whole process. And in this particular initiative, they're thinking about these funding sources that you may have kind of like buried somehow. And one of those is thinking about who your grantors are, who your really high dollar funders are. And this initiative is just bringing home the point that transparency is one of the key things that's important. And again, it's not just the IRS, it's the state also. The state of Texas, when you formed your nonprofit organization, when you formed that corporation, it said that you must have financial statements that the state can go and look at any time. So it's the state, it's the government, it's grantors, it's funders. Even within the organization, you want to be very transparent so that other people that are looking at the organization say, you're spending our money in a really good way, making a substantial impact to our society. I've already indicated that we need impact, transparency, and sustainability. Well, impact is measured by how much of your budget is allocated to your programs. And it's not just dollars, it's also how many people did you serve? How many animals did you save? How many meals did you produce? So it's not just about dollars, it's also about how many volunteers you had, how many people you served, what demographics they had, how their lives were impacted, what the outcome of your programs are. But one thing I want you to keep in mind is that you can't spend all of your dollars on the programs. I mean, it might be counterintuitive because you want to say, well, I want my programs to be front and center. That's how that people know that I'm doing a good job with this impact. But if you spend all of your dollars on programs, then there's no way for you to actually run this organization. So when you're allocating your budget, you want to understand that you absolutely must have some dollars allocated to the administrative part of running a nonprofit organization. That's, for example, paying for dues to Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts. That's an expenditure that would fall under the administrative umbrella that you want to make sure is part of your budget so that you are making sure that you're able to be transparent. And then when we think about fundraising, we think about, okay, well, if we spent all of our money on programs this year, well, then we don't have any to spend next year. And so we don't have that sustainability. Well, especially when you're thinking about grant writing, one of the things that they want to know is, do you have funds from other places in order to help balance out their dollars? Because they want you to be sustainable. If they're going to contribute to your organization, they want to make sure that it's going to go beyond just today. Sure, their particular funds may be only valid for 12 months, just your one fiscal year, but they don't want to support just one. They want to see that you're already thinking about the future. That's why you need to spend some of your budget on actual fundraising. So the allocations here, no more than 85% in your program, no more than 20% in the administrative part, because once you get over that, it looks like, well, why are you spending so much on administration when you could be spending it on fundraising or programs? And if you aren't doing any fundraising, that's going to make it look like there's a potential that you aren't looking far enough out into the future to be sustainable. One of the pitfalls that we see when we think about impact is if you are scrambling at the end of the year and you just have this shoebox of receipts that you're going to dump on the table and you're right there right before you have to do the 990. It's not, it makes the impact of your story less, which means that the way that you're presenting the numbers might not be as full as it could be. So it would be kind of like reading a comic strip instead of a novel, and where you get 3 little pictures in just a little caption. And yeah, you can kind of get the gist of the story, but you have such a better chance of really telling that story through your 990 and through your statement of financial position, as well as your statement of activity, when it's not just a box or a bunch of statements. You go, well, Lisa, I'm a little more organized in the box. I save my statements every single month. Okay, but that doesn't give me insight into the difference between your programs and your administration. So if you've got a spreadsheet, you've got your bank statements, you've got your credit card statements, it's not clear when you're looking at that transaction for $150 expenditure at Walmart, whether that was for paper and a new printer for the administrative office, or whether that was for program supplies for one of your programs. Without having the receipt and without actually categorizing it between programs and administration, it's not very clear, and we don't want that confusion. We want very, very transparency, which leads to sustainability. That transparency side can also be, if you're not more organized than just that box of receipts, can also come when you don't know which grant paid for which expenditure. It is a red flag for both funders and auditors, both the IRS auditors and CPA auditors, if you cannot identify which grant paid for which expenditure. And this thing about commingling funds, well, what that means is if you had a grant from the city of Austin and you had a federal grant, and if you can't easily and transparently identify that this one transaction was covered by the one from the city of Austin, the grant from the city of Austin, then you might have looked like you counted that one expenditure, that one Walmart receipt for both grants. Well, that's like not very transparent, and it might make the funders a little suspicious about whether or not their money has been spent appropriately according to the grant. So you really want to be clear and transparent, not just with the outside world, but especially with your grantors. So Echo Arts is going to be our example this evening, and Reed is the executive director over there, and he is changing lives through music, and he's putting on all of these programs that can help people get access to music that they might not have had access to before. But he's got that giant shoebox. His is probably bigger than a shoebox. His is more like, one of those big envelopes of, and it is just crammed full of receipts and shoved in there, and they're crumpled, and he doesn't have any recollection of really, it says that there was some paper on there, but he doesn't know what it was for. And he doesn't, it's not clear by any of the information that he has, whether the information, again, without one receipt, was it for the youth workshop or for some sort of overhead thing? And his story, therefore, when he gets to the 990, all it's going to say is, we spent some money on a program. Well, that doesn't really tell the story. That says that at least I filed my 990. Okay, great. But again, we can use that 990 as a methodology to let the rest of the world know what it is that our impact is going to be, what our mission is. And we don't want it to be unclear. We want it to be absolutely crystal. So one of the solutions is starting out with really good record keeping and having a real accounting system in place like QuickBooks Online is going to be one of your first lines of defense. Some people have said, well, I'm not big enough for QuickBooks Online. I have less than $50,000 in expenditures, so it doesn't really make sense for me. Well, TechSoup, that is TECHSOUP, TechSoup. I'm going to put that in the chat if you are joining us through live right now in live. If you are live with us and you have a question, please put it in the chat. But in order to do that live, you do have to have a YouTube account to do that live with us. So with TechSoup, though, it is a nonprofit organization that provides technology solutions for other nonprofit organizations, oftentimes at a significant discount. So with QuickBooks, for example, right now they are offering QuickBooks Online subscription for $80 per year. Right now, that same thing for the for-profit world is going to be over $90 a month. So you're getting a substantial discount. And there are other programs out there like Xero, Xero. That's another QuickBooks equivalent that's out there that is a great opportunity, but it's not quite as at such a discount for nonprofit organizations. And QuickBooks, the version that they have for $80, gives you all of the elements that you need in order to really give a transparent view into your organization. So I prefer QuickBooks Online through the TechSoup discount if you are a nonprofit organization. So tonight's conversation is going to be how to use that particular tool in order to make sure that we have a clear picture into our impact, we are transparent, and that we are looking to be sustainable. It's going to, by default, give us tracking and reports to be able to differentiate between our programs, our management in general, and our fundraising, and easily be able to give us a focused and rather efficient way to bring all of the financial information together so that we can spend a little bit more time, not just doing the financial side of it, but gathering those other metrics that that can help us tell that story better. Remember that it's not just about dollars. It's also about how many people that you've served, how many meals that you've given, how many festivals that you've put on. In the chat, someone recommended Wave accounting. Yes, I've had experience with it. The free version of Wave does not have enough bells and whistles around it in order to slice and dice the information in a way that is effective, like QuickBooks can. The paid version has some, but again, it's not really intended to be used for nonprofits. For that matter, neither is QuickBooks, but QuickBooks at least has a way to easily have all of the information trackable. Wave, even the paid version, does not. I don't really recommend it, not when TechSoup has QuickBooks, which is a much more powerful reporting tool that for $80 a year. It's just, it's significantly more powerful. And for the dollar difference, it's really not worth trying to use Wave. And it's kind of like the same thing with a spreadsheet. Can you do it in spreadsheets? Absolutely. But it's going to take you a lot more time and energy when there's a tool out there for much less, for such a significant discount that we might as well use the tool that's already built. We want to track three things out there. We want to track the what, and we're going to do that by, in the nonprofit world, we call it the natural chart of accounts. That's what did we spend things on? Did we spend them on occupancy, like rent? Did we spend them on program supplies? Did we spend them on contract labor? Maybe we paid some performers to come and be at our festival. So it's the what did we spend it on? And then we need to know why did we spend it? That's the functional area. If you've ever looked at the full 990, you know that one of the things you have to do is take all of these natural accounts, and you have to identify, were they program expenditure, were they management and general expenditure, or were they fundraising? And that's where we go back to 65 to 85% should be on programs, and 10 to 20% should be on management in general, and 10 to 15% or so should be on fundraising. And we need to know what those are, and we can do that in QuickBooks through classes. So the what is the natural accounts in the chart of accounts. The why is why did we spend it? Which of the functional areas did it go in? And in QuickBooks, we call those classes. And finally, with grant reporting, we're going to use the QuickBooks Online tool called projects in order to know who that money was from. Now, if it's just, maybe you don't have grants, that's cool. You don't have to use projects. But if you aren't using, if you don't have grants yet, I would propose that by the time you start getting all of this together, we can start thinking about being grant ready, because now we have a mechanism in place in order to do grant reporting, because they're going to ask how their money was spent. And using QuickBooks Online projects is one of the ways that we're going to be able to do that effectively and efficiently. If you guys are interested, I do have a way to download an Excel spreadsheet so that you can upload the unified chart of accounts. You remember I was talking about the chart of accounts, the natural chart of accounts. Well, I highly, highly recommend that we use the unified chart of accounts for two reasons. One, sometimes when you guys get to talking amongst yourselves, you and the board members and some of your volunteers, you start talking in terms that is centric just to your organization. Well, when it gets to the 990, those have to translate into certain areas on the tax return. And the unified chart of accounts easily is mapped, because all of the big organizations use the unified chart of accounts. So all of the big nonprofit organizations. And so if you use a tax preparer, or you come and you ask a question through Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts, we're going to recommend that you use the unified chart of accounts so that it can easily be mapped to the 990, as well as if your financial statements, if your statement of activity has the same general ledger account names, the same chart of account names as the big guys out there, you're going to look more professional. So when you present it to a grantor as part of your grant application, you're going to look a lot more like you know what you're doing, and that you have the ability to do really good grant writing. Right here on the screen is the very long version of how to get to that directly. If you don't want to use a QR code, you can also go to Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts. There, I'm going to put that in the chat also. That's Tala Arts, TALARTS.org. And both the uploadable version and a PDF of the full version of this unified chart of accounts is going to be available for you there. Without the unified chart of accounts, again, you're going to have some expenditures in there that may have some names that don't mean anything to the outside world. And if you have, again, you're not going to look as professional. So I really want you guys to really be considerate of thinking about utilizing the names of the chart of accounts in addition to the numbers. So in QuickBooks, I want you to go, if you have QuickBooks, if you don't have QuickBooks, I want you to go to TechSoup. Again, that's TechSoup.org. I'll put that in the chat also. I want you to go to TechSoup and get it right away. If you do have QuickBooks, there's 3 things that I want you to do. I want you to go right now into the little cog in the upper right-hand corner. And then I want you to go to Settings and Advanced. In Advanced, I want you to, in the chart of accounts, I want you to enable the account numbers. I also want in Categories, I want you to turn on Track Classes. And the third thing I want you to do is turn on Organize all job-related activities in one place in projects. So that's turn on and enable account numbers in the chart of accounts. I want you to turn on Track Class in Categories, and I want you to have your projects turned on. In your chart of accounts, one of the biggest things that I find useful as an accountant, and to be completely honest, when you start talking in terms of the chart of accounts with even internally to your other board members and your board members and other people that really want to understand what's going in your organization. Sometimes there's accounts that have a tendency to sound a little bit alike. And when you use the account numbers, then we know exactly what we're talking about. One of the examples is there's accumulated depreciation and there is depreciation expense. The word depreciation shows up in both. When you know that depreciation expense should start with a 5 or a 6, and depreciation and accumulated depreciation should be somewhere in the 200s, then you know that which one you're actually talking about. So I highly recommend that, first of all, you use the unified chart of accounts, and second, that you make sure that you get those account numbers turned on. When we're talking about the classes, I want you again to go into QuickBooks and make sure that you have that on, and then you want to create a class. There's at very minimum 3 classes that I want to see. I want to see a class for programs, a class for management and general, your administrative function, and a class for fundraising. So at very minimum 3, but really, because you probably have more than one class, more than one program, I want you to identify the programs, not just one lump sum. And the reason we want to do that is because you remember way back at the beginning when we were looking at the 990 Easy and the 990 on page 2, we're able to put 3 programs on that page. And so we're really able to highlight 3 separate, really awesome areas that we have impact in. So most likely you're going to have at least 3. I recommend no more than 6 to get started with, because when you get more than 6, well, first of all, you only get 3 on that first page. Now you get to talk about additional ones in Schedule O, but people may not dig down to Schedule O. So you want at least 3. But when you get too many, then it gets a little bit overwhelming. The other thing is that what I want to talk to you about your programs is you want to make sure that you're thinking about your program names. Now, we're going to use the 990 as a marketing material. And because of that, if we just said that our program name was education, that doesn't tell the world much about that program at all. Whereas if we said that it was educating youth about art, ooh, now that's a little bit more. And if we went an additional step, then maybe we could actually think about the outcome of what that education is supposed to do for these young people. It's not just educating them. We want them to take that piece of education and somehow or another impact their lives. So when we're thinking about using classes and the names of our programs, we need to be thinking about them in a marketing way, not just in their function. So if you're live here tonight, I want you to put one program that you guys do into the chat. Here's an example of what the programs might look like and the names of the classes so that we can think about the outcomes. The other thing is that you kind of want to keep those names short. If you say, you have 144 characters and it's 3 sentences long, we want that program to be well developed, but when you run your statement of activity by class, which is a great report, that is the report that you will live and die by in QuickBooks, is your statement of activity by class. You're going to get one column for each of these classes. And so if you have a name that is this long, the column is going to take up this much space, and then your report is going to be forever and ever and ever long. So I really like to keep the names fairly short, and I want you to keep them outcome focused. So we do have someone in the chat says spring choral practices and community concert. All right, that's International Student Summit. These are excellent names for things. The spring choral practice and community concert, that may be a little bit long, only because, again, when we're thinking about running the report, it's going to take up this much space, maybe not this much, but still this much. And if we could shorten it and think a lot about the outcome. Another thing I want to point out with regards to programs is that a lot of, especially younger nonprofits, think about their events and their projects and the webinars that they do as the program. These workshops, Houston Metal Arts Guild Medals Workshop, okay? The 10 by 10 minute play festival, love that, right? Workshops in and of themselves support the program. The program supports the mission. So maybe workshops isn't the program. Maybe educating guild medal people in order to provide them with a way to enhance their marketability, right? Enhance their skill set. Maybe that's really what it is. And workshops are the events that happen underneath them. In the middle here of our example, we have, can't even read it here. We have the welcome table. And under the welcome table says to me, this is a program that has open arms. Now, I don't know exactly what the table is about, but it's definitely maybe has something to do with some food or something to that effect. But it's definitely by using the word welcome, it definitely tells me that it's inviting. And I want the outcome of this program to have that invitation to it. Below that, we can have a subclass utilizing QuickBooks terminology, subclass called Open Doors Concert Nights. Okay, so it's not talking about food, but it is talking about the possibility of having this function of a concert going up to this program called welcoming table, right? So the welcome table could have many different things under it and they support that program. So when we're thinking about putting it on the 990, our program is called Welcome Table. But when we have that little description, we would say that we had 14 open doors concert nights that drew 7,200 people to it, right? That tells the story of how impactful our program was. So understand that the things that you do are not necessarily programs. Your programs are a group, can be though, a group of these things. Now, if the only thing that you do is a festival, then maybe you only have one program. If that's all you do for the whole year is this one festival. But I would still say that maybe you keep yourself open, because maybe it's not just that you provide a festival. Maybe you do a festival, but then you do education because you want to put on workshops and seminars and webinars in order to enhance that idea of a festival. So remember that when you are naming your programs, you want them to be outcome focused and kind of short in their name, because again, you want it to be, you're going to use the name of the program to put out there to not just people that are going to attend the workshops or the events, but also to potential donors and funders. And when you keep the names a little bit shorter, it also helps with running this report. The last thing that we want to talk about with regards to QuickBooks is utilizing the projects functionality within QuickBooks. Again, you're going to want to turn on projects utilizing the little cog in the upper right-hand corner. Make sure that it's turned on so that we can utilize this functionality. This is going to be able to let us track the grant in a number of different ways. And even if you don't have a grant that needs grant reporting, for example, perhaps you just got $2,500 from Walmart and Walmart says you can use it on whatever you need to. Great. Well, you need to know whether or not you've spent all that $2,500. This is another way to make sure that you're spending it in a way that is consistent with your policies, procedures, and internal controls. When you set up your project, the first element at the top is the actual customer. The customer in our Walmart example was Walmart. And the grant is, I like to put the year that it covers, or the years, right? So maybe it's the 2026 Walmart grant. And I may reference it again. Let me give you an example from the city of Austin. The city of Austin would be the customer, and the project would be the 2026 Thrive grant. You always want to put it to start with in progress, and almost every single grant has a start and end date. So you want to make sure that you put the end date in there so that you know when that grant should be over, and you should change the status from in progress to complete. You can also put some notes in there about whether it's a restricted grant. For example, the Thrive grant tends to be restricted because you can only use it on the things that you told the city of Austin that you were going to use it on. So you might want to put a note in there. You can also attach the entire document that you got from that customer. Let's say though that you just got a grant from a really nice donor. That's okay. Make sure that you put the information around that grant. Again, it's part of it is for your own transparency. You want to make sure that you spent that grant appropriately and that you spent it all the way down. Well, Lisa, I could just look at my bank account. I know if I don't have any money left, I spent it all. Well, that's true, but that's not very transparent. That just says I have no more money left and I may not be sustainable. But did you spend grant money, or did you spend donations that were not focused on that grant side of things? Utilizing project can help you make sure that you keep those separate. One tip that I've started to do with a lot of my nonprofit organizations is that I've created a project for when there isn't a grant that they need to put it against. What that does is help you get consistency. So for every transaction, there is a class, there is a customer, there is a project. So that helps us, and there's always got to be something about the chart of accounts. So that makes us hit all three areas every single time. So like I said, I set up a project that says just so the customer would be your organization, and the grant would be just general donations. That way you have a consistency in the way that you're posting your entries all the time. This is an example of a grant that this person got. It was a $9,000 grant, and so far they have spent $4,896.98 on this grant. Some of it they spent in payroll, some of it they spent in contract labor, some of it they spent in job supplies. So you can see that they have little over $4,000 left to spend on this grant. So this is one of the ways that you can look into QuickBooks. If you are recording everything on an ongoing basis against the grant, you can see, oh, well, I still have $4,000 left to spend. One extra tip that doesn't really have anything to do with the projects or the classes does have a little bit, well, it does, because in QuickBooks, there is a functionality that is around the budget. Now, every nonprofit organization must have a budget. Why? Because you need to know where your money is going to be spent before you get there. And the board needs to approve that and understand where you're going to need money if you don't already have it in your back pocket. So utilizing the budget functionality inside of QuickBooks, you can create a budget for every single program that you have, as well as management in general, as well as fundraising, and then they will all roll up to the company level so that they all add up together. And you can print them out separately, you can print them out together, you can look at it by month or by class. It just has so much tools to use in there in order to compare your budget to actuals on an ongoing basis. But this assumes that you are going to actually record all of the transactions on an ongoing basis, not just to do the tax return at the end of the year. So utilizing the budget functionality, if you use classes and if you use projects, you can use the project estimates to try and look at how closely you're spending to what you expected to spend on the grant. But there's project estimates can help you with that side. The budget can help you when you're talking about the functional reporting of programs and administration and fundraising. And then it can, like I said, it can automatically all roll up to this giant one for your whole organization. So I really like this tool also with inside of QuickBooks, and it's, again, one of the things that you're going to find is that for the $80 that TechSoup charges, now we have a really good reporting way of capturing information as we go. So that eliminates pitfall number one. We're not going to do it at the end of the year in just this box of receipts. We're going to have an accurate 990. And again, even if you don't need the full 990, you still want to have really good transparency into your financial statements so that you can start working toward getting that 990 because you want to be, have more grant opportunities. It helps us with pitfall number two, that differentiation between programs and administration and fundraising, because you need to know. Yes, the outside world needs to know this, but you also need to know how much you're spending in each of these categories so that you can run your nonprofit organization in the most effective way. If you're underspending in fundraising, then next year you need to work a little harder on finding funds in order to raise funds so that you can be more sustainable. And if you don't have that insight, you don't know that, and that's one of the big pitfalls there. And again, if you have grants, you don't want to be commingling funds in any way, and utilizing the QuickBooks projects can really help you knock out that last pitfall. I told you earlier that the statement of activity by class is going to be your favorite report, and it really is. Sometimes when you have way too many classes, you may just want to look at one class at a time, and you can do that too. So you can kind of slice and dice your report any way that makes sense. But the statement of activity by class, that's where it really tells the story about your mission and how that's being fulfilled. And then when you run your project grant reporting, that's going to help keep that transparency, especially on that grant reporting side. Finally, we didn't really talk too much about your statement of financial position, but what that tells you is how much cash do you have? How much of it is restricted? How much of it is board restricted for future use? Because you want part of it is being saved to account for next year's programs, not just this year. And that statement of financial position, that's what that does. It tells you your sustainability story. Once again, we're thinking about transparency, sustainability, and impact. And you want your programs to be above 65%. That's kind of like the absolute bottom threshold of where you're going. But remember that you want to balance that out with, you can't have all of your money going to your mission, because that's going to, not leave you sustainable. And if you don't have enough money to pay for things like TALA dues, or maybe have a professional to help you do your QuickBooks file, then you're not transparent. one of the other things to think about is if you are a public charity, then you may need to make sure that you have that public trust by your 33.33% of your support coming from the public. Well, the only way you're going to know that is if you have it documented. We can get that through QuickBooks. And I just mentioned that sustainability side, that we want to save some money for the future. Well, you may also want to save money 3 to 6 months of expenses to make sure that if we lost a grant, I mean, think about the pandemic when a lot of granting and fundraising went away. We needed a little bit of buffer in there to make sure that we were sustainable. So we want to make sure that we've got a little bit of a survival net there in our reserve to account for the ups and downs of things, especially in the creative economy. Or if you've got a festival and it's just once a year, you want to make sure that you've got something in your back pocket for those ups and down times. Just as a reminder, if you want these downloads, here's another link that you can get them. We've put that in the chat also, and we're going to include it in the YouTube comments when we post this on Tala's YouTube channel. One of the things that I wanted to remind everybody about is that if you are a member of Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts, one of the things that we can help you with is get QuickBooks set up. Now, we can't do your bookkeeping for you. We can't do your tax return for you, but we can help you get it set up and get going in the right direction. So I want you to do 3 things, at least one of these this week. I want you to set up your chart of accounts, utilizing the unified chart of accounts as your guide. I want you to make sure you turn classes on and really think about your programming names. And I want you to create at least one project in QuickBooks projects so that you can account properly for your grants. If you don't have QuickBooks, please go to techsoup.org. That's techsoup.org. The opportunity to really get some fantastic discounts on technology it's a phenomenal resource. Again, you can utilize either the links in Tala. Oh, by the way, you can get them on Tala's website too. So don't forget, you can go there and look at this event, and we're going to have the links for these there. And remember, you can just simply use this and upload it into QuickBooks, and all of those account numbers will be there. We've talked a lot really fast about utilizing all of the information in order to really get to tell your story. And I really want to emphasize that the 990, while it is wildly important, is just like the cherry on the top. And I want you to use it as a marketing tool. And to be able to do that, you've really got to start at the beginning of the year and go through. We do have one question about, does it cost to join TechSoup? As a nonprofit organization, there is no fee to join TechSoup. And so you just pay for the programs that you actually purchase through them. So there is no cost. For Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts, there is a cost to be a member. But, if you utilize the getting set up in QuickBooks, getting your contracts in place by utilizing some of the legal team, it's just a phenomenal way to enhance your nonprofit organization through a really, really great organization. So if you've got any questions, make sure to go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll be here for about another minute and a half. And I'll go on about Texas Accountants and the Lawyers for the Arts. Don't forget that we've got the two, let me see if I can get back there really quick. Going backwards to the slides, making me a little dizzy. But we've got two more webinars and seminars coming up in this series specifically for nonprofit organizations. The next one I'm pretty excited about, and then the in-person panel on how to do fundraising. We just talked about that and how important it is to track that. Well, we're going to get some more ideas on fundraising and how to utilize your board a little bit better. Elisa, you have anything else?
No, I think that's it. Just wanted to mention that if you are interested in trying to set up your own QuickBooks and getting a little bit of assistance from Lisa, you can go to our website and it will show you the financial requirements to join TALA. And give you some more information about how to do that. You can do that online. You make your requests online. Those requests also would extend to legal matters also. So if you work with Lisa, you would also have the opportunity to work with an attorney also. If something comes up on anything, intellectual property, licensing, contracts, things like that, we could be able to help you with other stuff also. I think you got one question coming in, Lisa.
Is there an alternative software package that you would recommend for a micro organization that only has a few transactions per quarter? The answer is no. I really recommend that you utilize the tool QuickBooks, even if you only have a very few pieces of information coming in, mostly because you need that segregation between your functions, your programs, your can't talk now, your programs, your administration, and your fundraising. And you can't really do that effectively in another software. You can try it in Wave. That would be another option. Wave, WAVE apps.com is they have a free version, but it's not going to be suitable for a growing nonprofit organization. And now, if you never intend to grow, okay, then maybe you stay micro and you just use that. I don't recommend just keeping things. You cannot keep things just on your bank statement. That's not transparent enough. Another question, I've never used QBO, so this is a very basic question. We raise money through GiveButter and our payouts include multiple campaigns. Can one payout be divided into multiple classes, etc.? That was a beautiful question, and the answer is yes, it can. GiveButter doesn't natively integrate yet with QuickBooks, although Zeffy, Zeffy, which is another very common platform to do fundraising and take donations, and they also have campaigns. Yes, you can have multiple line items, and each one would go to a different program. So a different program or a different way that maybe some of it is fundraising and some of it is ticket sales and some of it is membership. And all of those would be different chart of accounts. So in your unified chart of accounts, those are different line items, and you need to break those out. So not only are they different revenue types, but they are also in different maybe programs, and some of it might be just regular donations and it's not to a specific program. So that was an excellent question. And yes, you can break it out and slice and dice it in that way. And that was actually not a very basic question. That's like 2.0. So you get points.
All right. If there's nothing else, then I think that we will conclude for tonight. And we do want to invite you to come back next Wednesday at 6 p.m. for the third presentation by attorney Aaron Rogers. And so, Lisa, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Those of you that know Lisa, I know some of you do. Our members have pretty readily access to Lisa. I don't want to say all the time because she gets swamped sometimes, but if we can't do it super fast, we'll put you in line and we'll get you in with her sooner or later. But please, think about joining if you're able to. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lisa or myself.
Awesome.
And everyone have a great evening.
See you guys next Wednesday.